Thank you, Fred. I'm sorry I jumped the gun there. It's great to be in Iowa, a place where I think you all understand the context of what we're talking about today, which is that American politics is very much a team sport now in terms of how it's financed. And some of the data that was shown to you earlier by my colleagues, Herndon and Biersack, illustrate that. You've seen it in Senate races, you've seen it in the Iowa caucuses, and you have seen it as a battleground state for contests for Senate and for Congress. And in that setting, what we end up seeing is that the players in this team sport of American campaign finance are first and foremost candidates for the reasons that Paul Herndon alluded to. They have their own campaign committees, they're involved in their own campaign fundraising, operating within the context that Bob was talking about of disclosure, sometimes on paper, but still disclosure, and with certain limitations that are very real for them, that of course many of them would hope to avoid in some future regime of campaign finance. The second major teammate in this team sport of campaign finance is the party committees. And the party committees have long been important in a variety of ways, and they continue to be participants in this process. So that candidates form what are called joint fundraising committees with their political parties. This is especially important at the presidential level. But something not mentioned yet today is that the Supreme Court, in other decisions, McCutcheon versus the Federal Election Commission most notably, has dramatically expanded the amount of money that the party committees can raise. And we don't yet know what the impact of that will be, because this is going to be the first cycle in which we'll see this expanded party fundraising in the post-Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act period, BICRA. Congress giving some latitude to the party committees at the end of the session in 2014, and a piece of legislation called Omnibus. It's an odd name. We can talk about it in Q&A if you're curious. But it included within it funding for the party committees for certain designated purposes. One of the three purposes was building funds, which, by the way, was one of the justifications given in 1979 for the amendments to the Federal Election Campaign Act that brought soft money into the game. So beware of amendments about building funds, because sometimes the notion of building is very different than you might imagine. The third part of this set of players in campaign finance at the congressional and presidential level is non-candidate groups. And as has been explained, they've been in the game and then limited by BICRA, and now they're coming back in a way that feels very much like deja vu. And so I'm going to talk today about those non-candidate groups, but let me illustrate this with data from your own state about the importance on the hard money side, the candidates as teammates side, of the Iowa caucus. It can generate substantial momentum. So the bright red line is what had been raised as of January 2012, about the time that you all were voting in your caucuses. And then by April, what had the candidates raised? And the two lines together would equal the total. You can see that there was a substantial bump for Romney, and for reasons you understand very well, not nearly as much of a bump for Santorum. Where were those ballots anyway? What's fascinating to me is that even though he was not challenged, Obama was not inactive in campaign finance and had done quite well in this period of the off-year fundraising, the odd number year that we're just finishing up now. And that was important in the game of the 2012 election, that fundraising. And so the candidates and their allied supporters, and at the presidential level, the party committees tend not to be as active in the nomination phase. And generally, they've not been as active in the nomination phase in congressional races. That's changed a little bit because of the involvement of some outside groups in recent cycles. Now let's talk a little bit about outside groups and who these non-candidate groups are. The first thing to say is that since the passage of the Federal Election Campaign Act, 1974, the court ruled in the 76 decision, Buckley versus Vallejo, that independent expenditures must be allowed. They would be fully disclosed. And And so groups have long had, and individuals have long had the ability to make independent expenditures. And some individuals acting on their own did so as early as the 1976 cycle. But that was fairly limited. What we're seeing now in this world of super PACs is individuals coming into the game through an organizational mechanism they don't have to start themselves. That comes with consultants and lawyers and advisors, and all they have to do is write a check. Super PACs. I've created a bit of a typology of super PACs. The first thing to say is that when, as was alluded to by Paul in the conversation at the State of the Union address with Obama, most people thought the big danger with super PACs was going to be the involvement of corporations and unions who would be able to use their general treasury funds and could overwhelm the system. Imagine Apple or Microsoft, or you pick it, being able to commit funds from their general treasury into a campaign super PAC. And hence that discussion was often focused on those two players and the possibility that they would overwhelm the system. The reality has been that it's been far more driven by individual donors, many of them with privately held corporate ties, but it has been largely an individual donor-driven phenomenon. And there are, I think, three types. The first one, and by far the most important one, is the candidate-specific super PAC. I think it's fair to say candidate-aligned super PAC. This is a phenomenon in which individuals often leave the employ of the candidate and become the head of the super PAC, knowing very well who the friends of the candidate are, and is able to therefore solicit funds in very large amounts that would not have been possible under FECA or BICRA. So candidate-specific super PACs, and those are the ones I'll be talking about mostly today. Second type would be what I call party-centered super PACs. And in that instance, and you've seen evidence of this in your Senate race here and in other contests in the House, the leadership of Congress has worked very quickly, soon after Citizens United and Speech Now, to form party-centered super PACs for the House and Senate. The exception was Republicans in the Senate who did not form such a super PAC following the decision in 2010, and only recently have formed one. Rather, they depended upon a party-centered super PAC named Crossroads, headed by Karl Rove and Stephen Law and others. But Mr. McConnell has now formed a super PAC for Senate Republicans, and those groups spend in the key battleground races. You've heard mention of the North Carolina race in Bob Biersak's remarks, party-centered super PACs. The third type is ideological or interest group super PACs, and they are also important. They tend to be driven more by issues, and Paul illustrated one with the League of Conservation Voters. Then there are Section 501c groups. Section 501c is a part of the IRS code. 501c3 groups are the groups you're most familiar with. They're charitable organizations for which a contribution to those groups is a tax-deductible contribution. They tend to, at least in the past, have assiduously avoided being involved in electoral politics. And there's now, I think, some controversy brewing about the involvement of some of these groups who do the background research that Bob Biersack referred to that then gets used by the more political parts of Section 501c4, which is supposedly a social welfare organization whose primary purpose is not politics or elections. Well, what does primary purpose mean? That's the rub. And then two other 501c groups worth mentioning. 501c5 groups are labor unions. They're organized under that section. And trade associations under 501c6, the largest of which, the Chamber of Commerce, is a major player in this sphere. So you don't want to just focus on C4s. You need to remember C5s and C6s, especially C6s. Now, candidates have increasingly gotten involved in all of these types with fewer examples of the C3s for understandable reasons. Let me illustrate this with some campaigns. Rubio has the Conservative Solutions PAC, which is his super PAC, but he has the Conservative Solutions Project, which is his 501c4. Now, what's the difference? Well, the donors to the C4 are not disclosed. Back to Bob's point about the importance of disclosure. I've been told by some consultants in Washington that when they meet with donors in a room like this, they will say, how do you feel about disclosure? If you feel like you can have your identity disclosed, then we'd really like you to give first to the candidate, and then the max out level, and then to the super PAC, because that's the most efficient way for us to spend your dollars. But if you don't want to be disclosed, you can give to our 501c4 over here in this corner. Please go over there. Sounds like the Iowa caucus. Then, if you don't want to be disclosed and you want a tax deduction, we have formed a research entity that's going to meet over here, and we'd appreciate you going there. And that is the sorting kind of process that's happening with campaign finance. Let me continue with Cruz. He has at least 3 super PACs that bear the name Keep the Promise, and he's attached, much like the Super Bowl, Roman numerals after them, Roman numeral 1, 2, and 3. What's fascinating about his super PACs is that they are largely funded by individual billionaires who seem not to want to play together. So they're teammates, but they really want their own super PAC. So it's a Keep the Promise Roman numeral 1, funded by 1 billionaire, and so forth. And I can give you the names of the billionaires, thank heavens, because the super PAC disclosure is released. Bush is another example. Bush started the Right to Rise Leadership PAC in January of 2014. It was an exploratory committee in the conventional way candidates have often done this. Then he started the Right to Rise Super PAC 1 year later in January 2015. This is that period, you'll remember, when Bush was running, but he would say he was not running, except once when it slipped. And then he had to correct himself. No, I'm not really running, even though I'm here. And then he started the Right to Rise Policy Solutions, a 501c4 organization. Now, if your head's spinning, like you're trying to keep track of all this, welcome to the world of a reporter today who's trying to understand what money's going where. But go back to my analogy of being in the room and being told, if you want to help Bush, go into that corner or this corner based upon your disclosure preferences. Now, super PACs are often funded by very wealthy people. This is a chart that illustrates from 2012 the number of people who gave $1 million contributions or more to the super PACs whose names you've since forgotten, since these are names meant to engender warm feelings but be eminently forgettable, like Priorities USA, which is still involved, it's now Clinton's Restore Our Future. Future was a big deal in 2012. Romney and Gingrich and others used Future a lot. What did super PACs do in 2012? Well, this is a chart that gives you some sense of the overall spending by these super PACs. Remember, Future being important. 153 million for Romney, and overall 250 million when you add in Crossroads and other money. Both Romney and Obama, in the aggregate, when all is added together, spent over $1 billion in 2012. But the difference in where the money came from is remarkable. 3/4 of Obama's money came from individual donors. Half of Romney's money came from individual donors. Romney did much better among super PACs. Obama not as well. Romney did much better among 501c organizations. Obama not as well. So there is a bit of a partisan sorting here, with Republicans exploiting the outside money options at present more than others. What did the super PACs do? What was the consequence in 2012? And therefore, what do we look for in 2016? First, it prolonged the race. It made the race longer for reasons I think that Paul alluded to with his data. It introduced negativity into the race that then the other side could use in the general election. The best example is Bain, which was brought up by Gingrich in the primaries and returned to by Obama in the general election. Super PACs are going to be important again. This is data from June from the Wall Street Journal. It shows some projected additional data through the next reporting period. The key point has already been alluded to, which is that Bush has far and away been doing the best in super PAC fundraising. They are a necessary but not sufficient condition for candidates to compete these days. And the reason they're not sufficient means look at people like Mr. Walker, who did relatively well with outside money. It is not going to get you there, but without it, I think most candidates would worry a lot about being competitive. Again, it's being used more by Republicans than Democrats in this cycle. 501c groups were important. Let me talk to you a little bit about some controversies that are brewing and important to watch. One is timing. Super PACs are changing the timing of their entry into the race. I mentioned the Bush example a moment ago. They call it the testing the waters stage. They delay the announcement of their official candidacy so they can do more of that super PAC fundraising, as illustrated by Bush's success. A big challenge with disclosure. The more money that's going to the C3s and C4s and C6s, the bigger the challenge we have in knowing who's actually funding these races. Another challenge is in coordination. Is there coordination between the candidates and these super PACs? And this is a research topic that I'll be exploring in this cycle, for example. Then the function of super PACs has changed. In 2010 and 2012, it was largely television. But what you're seeing in 2016 here in Iowa and in other places is a much more multifaceted use of super PACs as a campaign entity, where they're involved in GOTV, where they're involved in hosting events, as with Carly Fiorina's campaign, where they may be running the turnout GOTV operation, something that I want to learn a little bit about tonight and tomorrow here in Iowa. Disclosure remains a major concern, and especially as has been illustrated in the 501c4 world. As those players become more and more important, what does that bode for the future of our elections? And then the transfers of funds from these undisclosed entities, the C4s and others, into the areas of super PACs, so that you can raise money in a C4 and then transfer it into a super PAC and reap the benefits of the higher ratio of spending allowed. So again, it's great to be back in Iowa, where next to Ohio, I would say you're the epicenter of all of this. And you're the epicenter for a longer period in Ohio. For that, you have every reason to be very proud. Thanks.